Welcome to All Sorts Podcast. We're the show that pulls back the curtain on history, looking for those hidden currents that shaped everything.
That's right.
And today we're doing a really fascinating deep dive, I think, into something fundamental, water. Specifically, rivers, wells, and springs in ancient civilizations.
Yeah, it's easy to just think of water as, well, water, but for these societies, it was so much more. It was life, belief, power.
Exactly. More than just H2O. It was tangled up in their beliefs, shaped where they lived, how they grew.
Absolutely.
So join us as we, trace this vital role of fresh water. We'll be looking at Mesopotamia, the Ganges, Rome, the Jordan River, even ancient Scotland. Quite the journey.
It really is, and it's amazing how differently cultures related to water, even while universally depending on it. It reflects their environment, their cosmology.
Oh, okay, let's dive in then. Starting with Mesopotamia. It's famously called the land between the rivers, right? Part of the Fertile Crescent.
That's the place, one of the earliest spots where agriculture really took off.
But it wasn't just fertile soil, was it? The water source was key, especially since rainfall wasn't reliable there.
Not at all. Rainfall was scarce, pretty unpredictable, actually. The real heroes were the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They provided that constant, reliable source of fresh water.
So essential for farming in what could have been a much tougher environment.
Absolutely essential. And it wasn't just about, watering crops. Having that reliable water likely pushed them towards developing irrigation, managing resources.
So maybe even laying groundwork for, social organization.
It's very likely. Managing water, especially on that scale, requires cooperation, planning, maybe even rules and leadership. It becomes a societal project.
Makes sense. And the Greeks even named it Mesopotamia, land between the rivers. It's right there in the name, how central they were.
It really defined the place.
Okay, so from those Mesopotamian rivers, let's kind of shift eastward to ancient India, the Ganges. Now, that's a river with some serious significance.
Oh, immensely so. It flows from the Himalayas through India and Bangladesh, a huge river system.
And historically, important for settlement.
Hugely important. Many of the big ancient capitals, Pataliputra, Kanauj, Kashi, they were strategically built right on its banks, or the banks of its tributaries. It was a major artery for transport, trade, life.
But the Ganges, it goes way beyond just the practical, doesn't it? There's a massive religious and cultural dimension.
There absolutely is. In Hinduism, the Ganges isn't just a river. It's worshipped as a goddess, Ganga.
Right, Ganga. And the mythology around her is incredibly rich, isn't it?
It really is. She's connected to the major deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and especially Shiva. You have the whole story of her descent to Earth, the Avatarana.
Ah, yes, where Shiva catches her in his hair to
Yes.
soften the impact.
Exactly. He's known as Gangadhara, the bearer of Ganga. It's this amazing image, her immense power being contained, channeled by Shiva. It speaks volumes about her nature.
And she's also seen as a mother figure, right? Gangamata.
Yes, Mother Ganga. And what's interesting is that she's often portrayed as nurturing, forgiving, kind of accepting everything into her waters to purify it. Despite the river's, physical power, she often lacks that purely destructive aspect you see in some other deities.
That's a fascinating contrast. Purifying and nurturing.
Mm-hmm. And she appears elsewhere, too. Sources link her to the birth of Skanda, the god of war, and she's the mother of Bhishma in the Mahabharata, so she's tied into these epic narratives as well.
Wow. And what about her mount, the Vahana, the Makara?
Ah, the Makara. Yeah, it's this mythical creature, often a composite of, a crocodile, elephant, fish, a water creature.
And it symbolizes.
It's got this dual symbolism, which is pretty common with water. It represents the life-giving aspect of the waters, but also the potential danger, the fear that deep water can evoke.
Life and peril side by side.
Exactly. The earliest known pairing of Ganga with the Makara in art is around 400 CE at the Udayagiri caves. But the Makara symbol itself is older, suggesting these ideas about powerful water beings were around for a while.
So these symbols, they build up layers of meaning over time.
Precisely. It's not static.
Okay, let's pivot again, this time westward to ancient Rome. We're looking at sacred springs now. Seems like a different kind of water source, maybe with a different feel.
Definitely a different feel than a massive river like the Ganges. In Rome, what's fascinating is how springs were perceived, because the water comes from beneath the earth up into the open.
It's crossing a boundary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It has this liminal quality existing between worlds, sort of. And this led the Romans, or at least shaped their narratives, to see some springs as gateways.
Gateways. Gateways to where?
To the underworld.
Whoa, okay. That's a stark contrast to the life-giving rivers. Does that tell us something about Roman views?
It suggests a complex relationship with the natural world, perhaps. This idea meant that certain city springs, like the Fountain of Annapurna or the Grove of Farina, weren't just water sources. They became sacred spots.
Sacred.
People used them to try and communicate with deities associated with the underworld, the infernal gods, and even apparently for performing binding rituals like curses right there in the city.
Binding rituals at the local spring. That's intense. Shows how everyday places could be deeply spiritualized.
Deeply woven into the fabric of urban life and belief.
All right, next stop. The Jordan River. Geographically, maybe not as grand as the Tigris or Ganges, but its significance, especially in the Christian tradition, is just immense.
Absolutely immense. Even its earliest mention, back in Genesis, sets the stage. The plain around it is described as well-watered everywhere, even as the garden of the Lord.
So right from the start, it's linked to life, maybe even paradise.
That's the implication, a blessed place. And then later, it takes on this role as a place of, well, transcendence.
Like in the book of Joshua, where the waters part for the Israelites to cross.
Exactly. It becomes a boundary, a threshold that's crossed with divine help. It marks a transition.
And there are other stories, too. Miracles associated with it.
Yes. You have the prophet Elijah ascending to heaven from near the Jordan and Naaman the leper being healed after washing in its waters. It reinforces this idea of the river as a site of divine power, healing, transformation.
But the absolute central event, for Christians anyway, has to be the baptism of Jesus.
Oh, without a doubt. That moment in the Jordan is pivotal. It's seen as his revelation as the Son of God, the start of his public ministry.
And that event imbues the river itself with meaning.
Profound meaning. Purity, cleansing, rebirth. It's directly tied to the Christian ritual of baptism itself. The symbolism is incredibly powerful and enduring.
It is, which makes learning about its current state quite sobering.
It really is stark. Our sources mention that something like 96% of its historical flow is gone, diverted for human use.
96%, that's staggering.
It is, and what's left is often polluted, saline. It's a really tough situation for such a historically and spiritually significant river, a real wake-up call about our impact.
It really makes you think about how we value or maybe devalue these places today compared to the past. Okay, final stop on our journey. Let's head north to Scotland. We're looking at ancient wells here. Smaller scale again, but still important.
Very much so. In pre-Christian Scotland, wells were often seen as sacred sites, linked to local deities, and crucially, they were believed to have healing properties.
Healing wells.
Yeah.
And did that connection survive the arrival of Christianity?
Interestingly, yes, it often did. The church, rather than stamping it out completely, sometimes sort of, adapted it. They associated the healing wells with Christian saints instead. The practice continued, just under a different banner, you could say.
So the reverence for the place, the water, persisted.
It seems so. You see this in traditions like the Clootie wells.
Clootie wells, what are those?
People would tie scraps of cloth or clooties to trees near a well, often as part of a ritual seeking healing. They'd dip the cloth in the water, touch the afflicted part, then leave the cloth as an offering, hoping the ailment would fade as the cloth decayed.
Wow, that's a very tangible link to these ancient beliefs.
It is, and you see variety too. In Stirling, for example, you have St. Ninian's, well, clearly a holy well, though later it just became a public washing house. Then there's the Butt Well.
Butt Well, odd name.
Yeah, sounds funny, but it likely just comes from archery butts, practice targets that were nearby. No real evidence it was ever considered holy.
So not every well was sacred.
Right. And then there's the Win Well, where some antiquarians suspected medicinal properties, but tracing folk magic and oral traditions, it's tricky. Records often miss that stuff.
Yeah, history doesn't always capture those quiet local beliefs, does it?
Not easily.
It's just amazing, though, looking back across all these places, Mesopotamia, India, Rome, the Jordan, Scotland water, whether it's a huge river or a small well, consistently holds this profound dual role.
It really does. It's fundamental for physical survival, obviously.
Yeah.
Agriculture, drinking water, transport.
But it's also just deeply embedded in culture, spirituality, identity, a powerful symbol everywhere.
And if you zoom out even further, think about those other great river valley civilizations, the Indus Valley, for instance.
Right, which was huge, wasn't it? Bigger than Egypt or Mesopotamia.
Yeah, geographically vast. We still don't know as much because we can't read their script, but clearly the Indus River system was central to their existence.
And in China, the Yellow River.
The Yellow River Huanghe settled incredibly early, maybe around 9500 BCE. But it was also notoriously destructive. Its floods were devastating.
China's sorrow, they call it sometimes.
That's one name. But that very danger, that need to manage the floods, apparently forced tribes to cooperate, to unite around 1700 BCE. That effort, that shared challenge focused on the river, is why it's also called the cradle of Chinese civilization. The river both threatened and forged the civilization.
So even the destructive power of water shapes society. It's just central in every way imaginable.
Pretty much, yes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things you think we should take away from looking at water in the ancient world?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that our human relationship with fresh water is incredibly deep and complex. It's never just been about survival, even though that's paramount.
It's always been tied up with belief, with meaning, with how we understand our place in the world.
Exactly. Spirituality, cultural identity, social structures, they're all interwoven with how societies related to their rivers, springs, and wells.
And maybe looking back at that ancient reverence, or at least that deep connection, maybe give us some perspective on our own times.
I think it absolutely does, especially now as we face, growing challenges with water scarcity, pollution, climate change, impacting water cycles. Understanding how vital and how sacred water was viewed could maybe inform how we approach environmental stewardship today. It puts our current challenges in a much longer historical context.
A really valuable perspective. Thank you. And on that note, to you, our listener, we hope you'll dive even deeper with us.
Keep exploring.
Find All Sorts podcasts on YouTube. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Help our community grow. And there's a whole wellspring of knowledge, if you will, in our back catalog. Plenty more deep dives to explore.
Lots to listen to.
You can also follow the meandering paths of our discussions on X, Instagram, and Threads. Just search for All Sorts podcasts on all of them. We'd love for you to join us as fellow travelers on this river of learning.
And maybe leave you with one final thought to mull over. Considering how deeply ancient peoples revered water, how can we today find ways to better honor and protect these absolutely vital resources that still sustain us all?